Saitama felt the cold grip of metal rebars curl around his neck once again. With a movement too fast to see, he snatched the tangled steel, ripped it free, and hurled it forward. The misshapen mass of metal and concrete slammed into a nearby wall with a deafening crash, as effortlessly as you or I might swat a fly. SCP-173, the sculpture, struck the wall with tremendous force and shattered into pieces, scattering stones and concrete dust in a wide, vaporous halo. "Another one?" the Cape Baldy said. "This is starting to get old, guys." SCP-173 didn't share Saitama's perspective on this. With Saitama looking away, another one of them manifested directly behind him and prepared to wrap its rebar limbs around the hero's throat. Luckily for him, he felt the breeze on it, and shoved his elbow backwards, shattering it into rust and debris. The facility around them had been completely destroyed. Totaled vehicles, opened containment cells, countless dead amidst all the chaos. But that's just a particularly rough Tuesday at the SCP Foundation. What made this scenario different was the gallery of homicidal modern art surrounding the hero for fun. A huge number of SCP-173 instances, each one eager to lunge forward and rearrange some spines any time they weren't trapped in the mortifying ordeal of being seen. Despite looking relatively unassuming, SCP-173 was an anomaly so dangerous that even SCP-682 feared its presence. That was until Saitama proved that the title hard-to-destroy reptile only applied to the rest of us, not him. It seemed that against Saitama, the SCP-173 clones would have a real challenge on their rusty hands, and this wasn't a challenge they were about to turn down. "Okay then," Saitama said, standing up and taking in the breadth of the threat around him. He clenched his fists inside his red rubber gloves. "Guess it's time to get serious." Hold up. How did we actually get here? Why has the Foundation containment site been completely destroyed? Why is Saitama under threat? And why are there so many clones of SCP-173? It all started with a once-in-a-lifetime conspiracy, perpetrated by a truly unique gang of conspirators. A few weeks earlier, a procession of black cars approached the warehouse under the cover of night. As the heavy rain above sluiced into the gutters, it was miles outside of anywhere important, with every effort being made to keep it from the prying eyes of the SCP Foundation and its many little cronies. For everyone else, this abandoned, or at least seemingly abandoned, building was neutral territory. Today, its ultimate use was going to be realized at last. The cars pulled into the warehouse. Their passengers, wearing coats and masks at first to hide their identities, stepped out, converging around a huge round table in the center of the room. Little by little, each of them removed their disguises and settled into the murk. A man in a black tactical suit, missing only its helmet, stepped forward. He was a hard-nosed man with a hooded stare and a long, ragged scar across one side of his face. This was General Dorian, the acting head of the Chaos Insurgency. For anyone not aware, the Chaos Insurgency is one of the Foundation's most bitter enemies. It is a group of former Mobile Task Force operatives who went rogue and decided to use their knowledge of the anomalous and the inner workings of the SCP Foundation to enrich themselves. "I'd like to thank you all for coming," General Dorian said in a low, gruff voice. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but this seemed like a matter of grave enough importance to warrant us all coming to the table." The problem, of course, was Saitama. The Foundation's superlative new agent had made running their operations almost impossible. He was there every time a team of insurgents tried to raid a containment site, ready to kick them into next week. He was there every time they were trying to sell an anomaly to a dangerous dictator in the developing world. He was always there, and the operations and profits of the Chaos Insurgency had taken a serious dip because of it. An Asian woman in a long black dress, embroidered with snake-like patterns, stood up next. This was Allison Chow, also known as the Little Sister and the Black Queen, acting as a representative for the Serpent's Hand, a group of interest intent on liberating anomalies from the SCP Foundation's containment and letting the public know the truth about their activities. "This Saitama situation is becoming untenable," she said. "I suppose that through our combined powers, we might be able to disable the threat that he represents once and for all. We've lost too many good allies to his ruthless red fists as of late." Next rose a man with swept-over hair in a conservative black suit. You wouldn't know it from his lack of augmentation, but he was the messiah figure of the Church of the Broken God. the technology-worshipping cult hell-bent on taking humanity to their vision of the next stage of evolution. They also possess some of the most advanced and valuable anomalous technology on the planet. I was hoping initially that we could make peace with the SCP Foundation, he said. Such a thing has been possible before, but their new reliance on this anomalous Saitama fellow has made them all the more arrogant and aggressive. I will happily lend my forces to the cause of subduing him. Of course, the next person around the table was impossible to miss. Whether it was from his grand top hat or his fine red coat, there was nobody on Earth who could do it quite like Dr. Wondertainment, the head of a vast anomalous toy company of the same name. Normally the doc was in good spirits, but today his mood seemed sour.
This Saitama is a complete killjoy, he whined. An enemy of joy, of whimsy. The Foundation has instructed him to destroy 3 of my factories since he came under their employment. It cost me millions. Does the man simply hate lightness and joy being brought into the lives of children? I will do anything to see him be taught the error of his ways.
This sentiment was shared by the 3 men in suits huddled close together at the table nearby. Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited, the proprietors of a collection of extremely exclusive clubs that also acted as a kind of sinister auction house for bespoke anomalous items. They were the most wealthy and connected of anyone at the table, and were more than happy to throw their considerable financial weight around if it meant putting Saitama to rest at last. Too many auctions have been interrupted, one of the 3 grave-faced businessmen said. Enough of these incidents, and your customers are liable to start losing faith in you. Such a thing must not be allowed. We all have professional standards to uphold, do we not? Admittedly, upholding professional standards was unlikely to rank high on the list of priorities for a Sarkic cult. Yet seated among the gathering was a representative of the Brotherhood of the Corrupted Flesh, one of the largest and most feared Sarkic cults still in operation. High Priest Ariadne sat draped in flowing red robes, her presence impossible to ignore. She turned her gaze toward the room, and too many eyes blinked in eerie unison, far more than any human should possess. The body of this Saitama entity is a truly fascinating conundrum. He's resisted some of our most powerful and dangerous viscera sorceries to date. As the attack dog of the Foundation, he has ruined many of our holy places of worship, she said. But how can we actually proceed? This so-called hero seems, by all accounts, unbeatable. Nobody had an immediate response to that one. In the following silence, a man wearing a beret, a black turtleneck, and purple lens John Lennon-style round spectacles stood up. This was the enigmatic artist known as Gazeblow, a representative of the anomalous collective of artists known as Are We Cool Yet? They were known for creating strange and often deadly anomalies in the name of high art. He had a stake in this, of course. On the Foundation's orders, Saitama had crashed several of their anart shows and neutralized every anomaly in attendance. As in all things, we will find the solution to our problems in creative expression, Gazeblow said. You're all welcome to do what you must if it makes you feel any better, but I'm a firm believer that the asset we already have buried behind enemy lines will be the most effective and aesthetically sophisticated tool at our disposal here. Others prepared to ask Gazeblow questions about that, but as a true mysterious artist, he was already halfway out the door before anyone could form the words. Then it seemed the coalition of interest would need to destroy the Cape Baldy without him. Saitama, meanwhile, felt like he was having a pretty chill week. He'd taken well to his new life as the Foundation's #1 field agent, seeing as they had better pay and employee benefits than the Hero Association ever gave him. For a man strong enough to evaporate world-ending monsters in a single punch, his biggest stressors were the same things that kept most of us normies awake at night. Rent, food prices, whether Silent Hills truly would have been as great a game as the playable teaser suggested, stuff like that. But thanks to the Foundation, 2 of the 3 were mostly covered now. He could actually afford to chill out and goof off during his lunch hours, which is exactly how he ended up playing paper football in the break room with Dr. Clef, an American custom that Clef needed to explain to his Japanese coworker. As Saitama prepared to give it a go, Clef made his fingers into the goal and prepared for the flick, and almost perfectly in time with Saitama's finger making contact with the tiny origami football, The ceiling was entirely blown off of the break room. In hindsight, I probably should have predicted that would happen, Clef said, silently worrying that the Foundation would take the price of the ceiling and roof out of his salary. Saitama just seemed confused. Wait, I didn't do that. And it was at that moment that the coalition of interest attack began. Several huge figures leapt down into the room. Giant, terrifying cyborgs, trained members of the Chaos Insurgency, enhanced physically by the Sarkics into brutes of pure muscle, with cybernetic implants courtesy of the Church of the Broken God, outright super soldiers. And they were here to bring the hero for fun to his knees once and for all. And on top of that, each one was effortlessly carrying a huge machine gun, the kind that you would typically see mounted as a turret on the back of a military vehicle. They opened fire, releasing a hail of gunfire all over the room. Normally, Saitama would have gone straight for them, but Dr. Clef was just as vulnerable to bullets as everyone else. Saitama darted at supersonic speeds and grabbed Clef, shielding the renegade researcher with his body. He leapt through a nearby wall as bullets rained down, blowing apart the office couch and the break room coffee machine. A truly brutal move. Who the heck are these guys? Saitama thought to himself as he dropped Clef, giving him enough time to run off to safety. Now Saitama could actually assess the situation and see what was going on here. Back in the annihilated break room, the three mutant cyborg Chaos Insurgents started zeroing in on their prey. Saitama certainly was freakishly fast, but with their augmentations, they'd be able to go toe-to-toe with their superpowered, follically challenged foe. They raised their machine guns and barged through the wall into the hall of the containment facility. There they saw the stark yellow of Saitama's costume and decided to show him their stopping power. With enhanced reflexes, they fired a huge number of rounds at the hero, only to see, to their horror and surprise, that every single one of these supposed armored-piercing bullets simply bounced off of Saitama's body. Now, it was his turn. Saitama, annoyed that these guys had destroyed the break room and almost made Swiss cheese out of his new workplace buddy, leapt towards the three mutant cyborg insurgents. With one punch, the point man of the trio was reduced into a pile of mutant sludge and metal component parts. The other two dropped their guns and went in for hand-to-hand combat, taking advantage of their augmented strength that the Sarkics and the Mechanites gave them. During the tests that the Coalition conducted, they were able to punch through the armor of M1 Abrams tanks without even breaking a sweat. Saitama, on the other hand, didn't even feel their punches. But when he punched back, the two former human Chaos Insurgents exploded into repulsive goo. Thankfully for the Coalition, they had reserves. Suddenly, more of these augmented mutant cyborgs ran into the containment site, opening fire and smashing through walls with their sheer size and strength. Researchers and guards were powerless to stop them, getting crushed or gunned down in the crossfire. It was an absolute slaughter, and only Saitama could stop it. He cocked his fists and prepared to go to town, but these freakish insurgents were just the tip of the iceberg for the Coalition's assault on Saitama. Thanks to Dr. Wondertainment, the site was becoming flooded with a vast collection of deadly toys. Exploding remote-control cars and planes, highly intelligent and vicious teddy bears with knives, and even highly venomous robotic toy snakes. Marshall Carter and Dark Limited was also doing their part, utilizing their vast wealth to hire magic-used thaumaturgic mercenaries and war wizards. And the Serpent's Hand was using their manipulation of interdimensional portals from the Wanderer's library known as the Ways to send all these directly into Saitama's vicinity. Perhaps this would at least give Saitama the kind of exciting fight he was looking for. The augmented insurgents decided it would be best to mob Saitama, trying to overpower him by sheer numbers. Even if he was stronger than them individually, there was no way that he could be stronger than all of them collectively. And yet, when the fists started flying, more and more of the insurgents were destroyed in single strikes, annihilating them instantly. In response, some of the mutant insurgents fell back and allowed the deadly toys and magical mercenaries to attack while they regrouped. God, you guys suck, Saitama said with a sigh. Okay, let's do this. Hundreds of knife-wielding teddies swarmed, but their knives seemingly couldn't penetrate the hero's skin. He flicked them away, sending them in all directions with such extreme force that they exploded into synthetic fur and stuffing the second they collided with a hard surface. Meanwhile, the remote-controlled toy cars and planes engaged in kamikaze missions against the Foundation's favorite Baldy, blowing up into great balls of smoky fire. But when the smoke cleared, Saitama was completely unharmed underneath. As the mechanical snake toys slithered in, the mercenary thaumaturgists began casting offensive spells and curses against Saitama, hoping to paralyze and burn him or scramble his mind. It was a glowing cavalcade of dangerous magic, the kind that you needed the exorbitant fortune of Marshall Carter and Dark Limited to be able to afford. However, as you probably expected, that money might have just been thrown into a deep, dark hole doused with gasoline and set on fire just to watch it burn. The spells seemingly had no effect on Saitama whatsoever, though he did remark on the light show at least being impressive. It was astonishing to the thaumaturgists. These same spells had killed hundreds before. Why were they being so ineffective now? But they didn't get to finish their thoughts. Saitama ran in at incredible speed, stomping and destroying the rest of the demonic wondertainment toys, and then smacking each of the wizards so hard that when they woke up, it would be a miracle if they even remembered their own names. They were just lucky that Saitama had a tendency to pull his punches with humans. The augmented insurgents, however, had forsaken their humanity, and thus, they were fair game for absolutely pulverizing. Before any of the mutant insurgents could pull together a solid counterattack plan, Saitama brought the attack to them. He delivered brutal punches that sent them back to their makers, metaphorically speaking, of course. They were dead. That's what we're saying here, just in case the visuals didn't communicate the fact well enough on its own. Soon enough, Saitama had leveled the playing field entirely. Every single anomaly who'd been sent in had been killed, and the mercenary wizards were still unconscious with probable head injuries. It seemed that the situation was now under control, and the combined efforts of the Coalition of Interest had still failed to stop Saitama, or even really make him break a sweat during the fight. But there was one group who hadn't yet pulled their trump card. Are we cool yet? And Gazeblow had been monitoring the situation from afar, waiting to see what Saitama was truly capable of. And now that he'd seen, he was ready to activate his own anomaly within the facility, the ultimate secret weapon of the Ultimate Anarch Collective, SCP-173, the Sculpture. Gazeblow sent the activation code, and the madness began. In its containment cell, SCP-173 started to duplicate, splitting like a cell in the midst of mitosis, until the cell was so full of examples that the very walls around it buckled and broke. After that, the sculptures were free and started hunting down the researchers and guards who were running through the halls. The anomaly may not have been cashing checks, but it was definitely breaking necks. It wasn't long before the halls were littered with bodies, and the ever-duplicating sculptures started zeroing in on Saitama while he finished off the last of the other forces. And if they had their way, this fight was going to be nothing but neck. If I wanted to enjoy some modern art, I'd go to a gallery, Saitama said as he fought sculpture after sculpture, as each one darted in and tried to wrap their rebar tendrils around his neck. Gazeblow and all the others hoped that they would be strong enough to actually violate the man's vertebrae, but Saitama was still fighting back with all his might. The rebar appendages were tearing away at the fabric of his suit, but they still seemingly couldn't put a scratch on his skin. That didn't stop them. Every single one converged on the Foundation's greatest warrior, hoping once again to overwhelm him by its sheer mass. Would the weight and power of art be the thing that actually killed the hero for fun? No, it would not. With one of his many secret moves, consecutive normal punches, Saitama destroyed every single one of the sculptures in a fraction of a second, leaving himself in a huge pile of rubble and twisted metal. The evil plan of the Coalition of Interest had now officially failed. Just another day at the office for Saitama. Now check out SCP Foundation Contains One Punch Man, Saitama's Big Surprise. And Saitama joins the SCP Foundation. SCP-076 Abel is annoyed. For more.